Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn, and I'm delighted to welcome back to the show Ben Habib. How are you doing, Ben?
Good morning, Andrew. Very well indeed, thank you. How are you?
Always a pleasure. And I'll tell you what, the 30th of June, 7 a.m., you came onto
Yeah.
this very program. You launched Advance UK. How's it going?
It's gone remarkably well. We took perhaps an unusual approach to the launch of a political party. We took the view that we would need to get to 30,000 members before we actually applied to the Electoral Commission for registration and therefore then the ability to contest elections and so on. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to check that my own assessment of there being demand for a political party actually existed in reality. And we've had a fantastic first 2 weeks. We've got over 12,000 supporters, which includes over 8,500 members, and we've raised £125,000 in 2 weeks, which is remarkable. And that puts us, by the way, I think, with a membership of well over twice, nearly three times what UKIP has, and in the top seven or eight of political parties in the United Kingdom. So, in 2 weeks, I think it kind of indicates that we're going to hit our 30,000 target.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what I love about having you on the show is that we get a chance for you to respond to the various comments that came as a result of the interview. And I look forward to my commission as a result of all the people who signed up for Advance UK. But
Yeah,
let me
course.
deal with
Yeah,
some of the feedback that came
sure.
along. You promised to save Britain, and you stated there will be no U-turns, no fancy three-word slogans, and Advance UK is gaining thousands of members because it actually stands for something. Now, some of the critics, and I think it's important that you have an opportunity to respond to this, they say that it's a generic corporate with no coherent policy. What's the one game-changing policy Advance UK offers that Reform UK can't match? And why should voters trust you and that you're not just a Farage clone?
Oh, I'm certainly not a Farage clone, and I think he would agree with that. There are not many things Farage and I now agree on, but he would agree on that one. Um, we're very different to reform. So let me just set out the constitutional question first. We're a company limited by guarantee. That is the appropriate form of company if you wish to have membership. Reform UK wasn't a company limited by guarantee. It was a company limited by shares, which is a profit entity, a profit orientated entity. Ours is one limited by guarantee. It's non-profit and it's open to members. And every member we've taken on is effectively a member of the entity Advance UK Party Limited. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have a constitution which enables members by a simple majority to remove any one of the board of directors, including the leader, which is quite different to Reform UK, where the members cannot remove the leader. Eventually, it's the board of directors of Reform UK that decide whether or not Farage is removed as leader. And the board of Reform UK is appointed by guess who? Farage. So there's a slight circularity there that makes the removal of Mr. Farage quite difficult. Whereas in our party, you can remove the leader in Advance UK, you can remove the leader by a simple majority of the members. But the other really defining constitutional difference is that we've created something unique in British politics, a college which will number between 50 and 100 people when it's at full tilt, and they will be elected by the members. They will not be on the shilling of the party, so they won't be paid a single penny by the party. They do it for love of country and because they wish to do good for the country. Um, and they will act as the eyes, ears, conscience, intellectual ballast, and checks and balances on the leadership. It's like a big body of non-executives who will be holding the leadership to account. And that is, as I say, unique in British politics. The Conservatives don't have such a body. Reform UK has nothing close to such a body. And the beauty of this college that I've set up is that, one, it gives members an ability to have a body of its own uh, in the party making sure that the leadership does what it says it's going to do. But moreover, it means that year to year, the political philosophy of the party can't be hijacked or traduced or changed at the whims of a group of small people or some form of entryism that might take place. It acts as a kind of balancing factor, preventing, for example, what happened to the Conservative Party, which, as we all know, has become part of the Uniparty. CCHQ in the Conservative Party is hijacked the entire party. So it's become more like the Liberal Democrats. That can't happen in Advance UK because the college will keep us honest. And we are populating the college at the moment. We haven't released any names. They will be released in the forthcoming weeks. And they are all people who will be recognized by our side of the debate to be fearless champions of nation state, freedom of speech, democracy, and equality under the law. And so that's the constitutional question. We're a very different party to Reform, or indeed the Conservative Party or any other party on the political landscape. The second question about policies. Policies will not be made until the party is registered with the Electoral Commission. That won't happen until we get 30,000 members. And we have committees set up which will comprise members of the party's executive and members of the college who will sit together, experts in their fields, and determine what the appropriate policy is for the party. Those policies, and this is the critical point, all those policies will have four guiding principles driving them. And they are the nation state, the protection and promotion of the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in all its parts and all its people, recognizing that we are constitutionally a Christian country. That's number one. Number two, that we support freedom of speech being the cornerstone of democracy, and we reject the indoctrination of our children and the clamping down of our ability to speak freely in the pursuit of some extreme ideologies that have gripped the country at the moment. That's number two. Number three, we stand for democracy. We wish to remove the tentacles of supranational institutions, international law, and domestic quangos from the democratic entity that is the United Kingdom. Our democracy has been deeply damaged by these supranational entities, international laws, and domestic quangos, etc. And they must be removed from the fabric of our democracy so that it is our parliamentarians who are who we elect and whom we can therefore hold to account. So we want to restore our democracy. Freedom of speech is obviously a key part of that. And then the fourth thing is equality under the law. And we used to be a bastion of legal correctitude. But again, in the pursuit of extreme ideologies, successive governments have effectively created a two-tier criminal justice system in the United Kingdom. And we wish to return a blindfold back to Lady Justice so that everyone in this country will be treated exactly the same way under the law, irrespective of their ethnicity, their sexual preferences, etc. And those are the four guiding principles. Now, you might say those guiding principles are bleeding obvious. What do you say in any of that, Ben, that is extraordinary? And at one level, I completely agree with you. But the really sad point to make is that there is no political party, if you examine them, that actually stands for those four principles: nation state, freedom of speech, democracy, and equality under the law. Not Reform UK, by no means. As we discussed in the last interview, Farage is on the record saying a united Ireland is inevitable. He's prepared to share a platform with the leader of Sinn Féin, an apologist for the IRA. That is not consistent with the nation state of the United Kingdom. Farage is forever cancelling people who tweeted something with which he didn't agree, or with which Hope, not Hate, didn't agree, and that is the opposite of freedom of speech. Farage doesn't believe in democracy. His own party is not democratic. He cannot be removed as leader. There are no real checks and balances on Farage. It is not a he's not a believer in democracy. And as far as equality under the law is concerned, Reform UK is all over the place. It recognizes the two-tier criminal justice system when it comes to identifying pro-Palestinian supporters who've urinated on statues, but it doesn't recognize the two-tier criminal justice system. Often it doesn't recognize it when that two-tier criminal justice system is doing ill by white people. And, we've seen that until very recently, Farage wasn't even speaking about the Southport protests and all the arrests that took place after that. I'm not sure he is speaking now. I know Richard Tice has spoken a bit about Lucy Connolly, but Farage is silent. And and also we see, and I want to stop talking about Mr. Farage, but we see him importing into his party people who hold views opposite to all those that I've just described, like Jake Berry, who's just joined them from the Conservative Party. He voted Remain. That means he's pro the supranational order. He was pro lockdowns, which means he's against our civil liberties and our democracy. He's in favor of net zero, which is one of those extreme ideologies which is so damaging the country and which must be removed. He is a senior member now of Reform. There is no hope in Reform. It has become a complete political mess. And we need a party that is serious and principled, and Advance UK offers both seriousness and principle.
Okay. Now, we've spoken previously, as you know, Errol Musk, Elon's father, is a regular, another regular on the Andrew Eborn show. Talk to me. I've seen some of the posts of Elon reposting your comments, especially after our interview. What's the current discussions with Elon, and has he offered any financial support to you?
I haven't sought any financial support from Elon. I think it must be so annoying for him, being the richest man in the world, to have people knocking on his door saying, "Can I have a bob or two?" So I haven't sought any money from Elon, and nor would I. Of course, if he wishes to donate, that's a completely different thing, and we would need to examine, what that is and how he would do it, and so on. Make sure we're compliant in both the spirit and the letter of British law. But uh, what I do know about Elon is that he has great concerns, as I do, about Western civilization, democracy in the West, and that we have very many shared views of how to achieve what we would call the saving of our Western values, culture, and so on.
Right. Now, as I say, I invited a number of people to pose their questions. One of the obvious questions from a lot of people is, why haven't you registered with the Electoral Commission yet? They point out it only costs £150. And some of the critics say that rivals could steal Advance UK's name. What's your response to that?
So, as I mentioned, we will apply to the Electoral Commission for registration when we get to 30,000 members. At that point, I know we've got a fighting army across the country for the ground game that's required to contest elections, and that my theory that a political party is wanted, not needed. I know it's needed, but I want to check whether it's wanted by the British people. If we get to 30,000 members, then I know that it's wanted, and that's when we will register as a political party.
And your
Um,
response to the suggestion that somebody could go and steal the name?
it's not so easy because they would have to apply to the Electoral Commission themselves to set up a party called Advance UK. The Electoral Commission does checks to ensure that it's not conflicting with anything else that's going on. And I think even the Electoral Commission would realise there's something out there called Advance UK that is going to be applying pretty soon as a political party.
Okay. One of the other criticisms, we talked about Elon and potential support from him. Somebody have said also that you haven't reached out to the American MAGA movement. Is that something you would do?
I don't know how one reaches out to the MAGA movement, but we do have friends in Washington, not just me, but other members of the college, which will be revealed, do have friends in Washington, and we will, of course, be developing our relationship with Washington once we're more established as a party. But the critical thing that I'm trying to do now, Andrew, is build the college and get really good people in the college who can assure the success of Advance UK and make sure we get to 30,000 members. Of the latter, I'm completely convinced, by the way, to be where we are in 2 weeks, uh, over 12,000 supporters, over 8,500 members. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's certainly a phenomenal achievement. Another phenomenal achievement, and quite a shock, was within a nanosecond of appearing on the Andrew Eborn show. There was the announcement about Rupert Lowe and his launch of Restore Britain. He says it's not the time for another political party. Why did you fail to recruit him as your first MP?
I failed to recruit him as our leader. I didn't just fail to recruit him as our first MP. I wanted Rupert Lowe to be leader of Advance UK. It was I'd felt for a long, long time that a new party is needed, way before Rupert Lowe ignominious exit from Reform. But when he was thrown out in the way that he was thrown out, I thought that created the opportunity for a new party because people could then see the real nature of Farage. And I spoke to Rupert straight away after he was thrown out, and I said, "Look, we should do a political party." To be fair to Rupert, I think probably my EQ wasn't performing very well because, as you might recall, Andrew, he was laboring under the threats of of police investigation and charges of bullying and so on. And I had assumed correctly, and I was certain at the time that I was correct, that all those charges were frivolous. And so I'd moved to the next stage in my own emotional thinking and said, "Come on, Rupert, we need to do a political party." But of course, he was stuck, I think, emotionally and intellectually fighting that battle. And he said, "Of course, yeah, we must do a political party." But it wasn't until May, when the police investigation was dropped, that I think he really thought about the implications, seriously thought about the implications of leading this party, which by now I'd got pretty well set up. And on reflection, he decided he wanted a movement rather than a party. We do disagree on that. I think a political party is what's required. I think it is what's wanted. Time will tell. But the only way to change politics is by doing it at the ballot box. And movements, as powerful as they can be, there are no shortages of movements in the United Kingdom. We've got many movements doing many different things. What we want is a political force, and Advance UK offers that opportunity.
So, I mean, in a nutshell, then why did the negotiations with Rupert break down? Because I know you and I have spoken several times on this show, and you seem to be like hand in hand, the perfect dynamic duo. What was the real catalyst, and when did you discover he wasn't going to support you?
No, I think the first wake up call was about towards the end of May, when I spoke to him once and he said, "Look, I think we should be doing a movement, not a party, and it should be cross-party." And I can't see any benefit. I mean, we do disagree on this. I can't see any benefit in a cross-party movement. I have joined Restore Britain. I have joined his movement, and I wish him all the success, obviously, because he's fighting the same fight that I'm fighting. But I find it hard to see how he will deliver change with a movement that includes Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats. You know, what is the only movement I'm interested in is the one that you get first thing in the morning after you've had a coffee. That's the most enjoyable movement of the day, isn't it?
Yes, thank you for that. Everybody put off their cornflakes. Um, what a lot of people, and this is something I've addressed ever since you talked about setting up the party, is about fragmenting the rights. And lots of the people
Yeah.
have the internet burst a blood vessel, if you like, all suggesting the same thing. I had Errol Musk on my show again yesterday and saying the same thing. It's going to fragment the vote, Ben.
So I think what Errol may not be appreciating is that there's no such thing as left and right in British politics. The schism, the opposites, if you like, in British politics are those who believe in running the country through the supranational order, the liberal globalists, if you like, the Labour parties there. That includes the Conservatives, by the way. Unless and until the Conservatives rediscover their Conservative DNA, they're not what you might think of as right wing. They're actually part of the Uniparty. We refer to them as the Uniparty because we recognise that they are part of that supranational liberal global order. So that's one side of the debate. The other side is those of us who believe in nation states, borders, democracy, the unit of democracy of the United Kingdom, in our case, freedom of speech, etc. And that's a very rarefied area. There are very few people actually who genuinely are offering that up as a vision. And as I explained in the earlier part of this interview, Andrew, reform doesn't offer it. Reform is sort of somewhere between the Uniparty and where we are. It sort of flits between the two. But it's got people like Jake Berry and Tim Montgomery and Charlie Mullins, who's another Remainer, and what's the name of their treasurer, that property developer, who counts Tony Blair and others, Nick Candy, who counts Tony Blair, and Peter Mandelson as his friends. Reform UK is a mishmash of lots of different things. It doesn't offer up any unified political philosophy. And so we're not splitting any vote because there's nothing offering a pro-nation state political message. And it's false to think we're splitting the right wing because there is no right wing. But the other thing I would also say, Andrew, is that even if you grant those who are concerned about the split in vote the notion that there is a right wing, which I dispute, but even if you take that as read that there is a right wing, the general election is not till 2029. There's ample time to make sure the electoral strategy for that general election is well crafted to make sure we get a proper government. The critical thing we have to do right now is make sure that the arguments for the United Kingdom, for freedom of speech, for democracy, for equality under the law, those arguments are marshaled, they're made well, and that they are delivered coherently to the British people so that the British people support that agenda. And if the British people come out supporting that agenda, then actually they will craft, the British people will craft the form of the next government. And we will get the kind of government we need to rescue the country. That's the aim behind Advance UK.
Yeah, and we've spoken also about this beforehand. You've pointed out that Nigel's very welcome to come and join up with you, and you've also pointed out that members of Reform are not really members of a political party; they're just the Nigel Farage fan club. Have you had discussions with Nigel since you launched the party?
I haven't had a discussion since Nigel, since he appointed himself leader of Reform UK. I haven't once spoken to him, even though I was deputy leader of the time. And I don't imagine I'll be speaking to him in a hurry.
But if we're going to sort of look at, as saying, getting people to vote, and as you say, we've got amount of time before the next general election. Surely those discussions need to take place, don't they?
If we do well in the polls, if we become a fully registered political party, which I anticipate will happen, and we do well in the polls, then I think we must all be grown-ups and talk. Of course, whether or not people behave like grown-ups, remains to be seen. But
so you're open for talks with Nigel?
I listen, I'm open to talk with anyone. Why wouldn't you be? It would be a very closed attitude to life to say I'm not going to speak to so-and-so and so-and-so. The problem I've got with Farage are all the problems I've outlined. He doesn't seem to have a political philosophy that makes sense to save the country. But of course, our existence, Andrew, may bring a degree of pressure on him. Just our existence may. And you may discover that he becomes more like us. Let's see what happens.
Let's certainly see what happens. I want to look at some of the policies because a lot of people say that they want to push you on the policies. Let's first of all talk about the border policy. You called Labour's one in, one out migrant deal with Macron returning just 6% of, I think, 21,000 channel crossings, the legalisation of illegal migration. What's Advance UK's radical border policy to top reform, stop the boats and silence Farage's humiliation critique?
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're not forming policies until we've actually got the college set up and the executive, and they will collectively make policies. But immigration is the salient issue of the day. And we do have an overarching approach to immigration. And as far as immigration is concerned, we have a number of things that we believe need to take place in order for this country to be settled on that front. And I can go through with them. It's a bit of a mouthful, Andrew, but if you'd like me to go through with them, I'll go through. So we must repeal the Human Rights Act. We must withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. We must withdraw from the UNHCR, and we must take back control of our borders entirely into the United Kingdom. That's step one. Alongside step one, another step one has to be an immediate moratorium on indefinite leave to remain in this country, no more granting of indefinite leave to remain, and no more granting of British citizenships. A moratorium on both those things, so that while we get to grips with the mass migration that's taken place so far and the mass illegal migration that's taken place, we're not compounding any long-term problems for the UK by making people citizens or giving them indefinite leave to remain. And then, as far as illegal migration is concerned, the channel crossings and so on, having ditched the European Convention and repealed the Human Rights Act, we will do what is absolutely necessary and should have been done in the first place, which is institute enforced borders. So we will have a dedicated force that's trained in its purpose to intercept the dinghies using sensors, drones, barricades, whatever's required, intercept those dinghies and require them to go back to France. The Belgians have done it successfully. They police their waters using a force like that, and they've reduced launches by 92%. So it works. And for those people who get to the United Kingdom illegally, because there will be people who get through the net, they and all those who are already here illegally will be invited to go home to their home countries. If they decline to go home, they will be detained in secure facilities under armed guard, and they will be deported. There will be no right of asylum. They will be deported. And if they come from countries with which we do not have a deportation arrangement, we will cease trade with those countries, assuming we trade with them, or we will cease aid to those countries, assuming we give aid to them. And if we do neither, we will find other forms of sanction that we will impose on those countries. And their people will remain under lock and key in the United Kingdom until such time as a solution is found for those individuals. But no one coming to the country illegally, no one here that is already in the country illegally, will be allowed to roam freely. They will be treated as they have broken the law because
Right.
they entered the country illegally. That's our illegal. Do you want me to go on about legal migration too?
Oh,
We do
yes,
have a,
absolutely. I think the
yeah,
more clear policies, going to say, Ben, that's the criticism a lot of people are saying is they want to hear what the clear policies are. And I
yeah.
take on board that you're saying you're going to wait until we've got some of it, but getting a steer on some of those would be helpful.
Yeah, so I think this is a salient issue. So I think that's pretty clear on illegal migration, isn't it? On legal migration, again, it's going to be a number of different things that we have to do. The first is we do need a program of consensual repatriation. So those people who are here on indefinite leave but do not hold British passports need to be encouraged to go back to their countries. And that can be done through financial inducements. And we must look at that. Sweden does it. It's a perfectly sensible policy to adopt. That's number one. Number two, we must set a salary threshold which is sufficiently high to make it extremely uncomfortable for employers to bring in cheap, unskilled labor. And we would suggest a salary level of at least £80,000 for that hurdle, which would put any immigrant coming into the country in the top 5% of earners effectively in the United Kingdom. There should also be a tax on employers who bring in foreign workers because they should really be looking to enfranchise British workers. They should be giving jobs to British workers. So there'd be a tax on employing foreign workers. And we would also, and this is the important bit in a sense, uh, cut welfare dramatically in the United Kingdom, which needs to be done anyway, and cut taxes on the working and middle classes, creating a proper gap between what you get on benefits and what you get in the workplace, and encouraging British workers to come back into the workforce. There are something like 3 million people not working because they've got mental health issues, and there must be very many millions, very many of them who don't have genuine issues, just being frank about it. Of course, there will be some who do need the support, but there'll be many who don't. And they need to have that unnecessary protection removed from them. They should be encouraged very forcefully back into the workforce. And British workers need to be able to keep that which they legally earn so that they can have aspiration. And I think if you do those two things, you won't need lots of cheap, unskilled labor coming into the country because British people will work. And wholeheartedly, I reject the notion that the Brits are lazy. I think that's rubbish. They've been mollycoddled into inactivity. The nanny state has become a wet nurse, and people have given up the notion of having to, personal agency's gone out of the window. People have just given up. They look to the state for everything at the moment. And that's got to change. And that's a critical part of addressing the mass migration that we've had to the United Kingdom. So I think with all those policies, we would effectively, I think overnight, by the way, we would stop illegal migration. Overnight, it would stop when people see what we're doing in the country. And legal migration would be dramatically reduced as employers could see what's coming down the track in terms of the hurdles required to employ foreigners.
Absolutely.
Oh, and by the
And
way, a couple of other things I forgot to mention.
yes.
No families can come with work visas. If you come on a work visa, you come alone. You do your work. When the visa expires, you go home. And the same applies to student visas. You come on a student visa, you do not bring your family with you. Um, and anyone who overstays a visa becomes an illegal migrant. They get the status of an illegal migrant, so they could then be detained.
Okay. So very clear on that, and other policies which are important to unpack when you get them. A lot of people have asked, I know it's a sort of generalization at the moment, about welfare reform. And obviously Labour's welfare reforms passed despite 47 MPs rebelling over benefit cuts. What advance UK's welfare fix would tackle abuse without punishing the vulnerable, and how would that differ from reform?
So reform hasn't offered up any welfare reforms. In fact, the only reform that reform is offered is removing the cap on the two-child benefit, which is absolutely absurd because that is more dependency. Um, and the other thing that reform has done, which is really odd, is to say that they would welcome back non-doms for a flat payment of £250,000 per head in order to get that status. And they would distribute that money to the working class. I mean, there can be no clearer redistribution of wealth attitude than that. You were precisely the opposite of what a party such as Reform should be doing. So Reform, again, hasn't got joined up thinking here. But our approach, there are 7.7 million people on universal credit. As I mentioned, 3 million of them are claiming mental health issues. About 1.5 million are out of work and looking for a job. And the rest of them are people who are actually working to some extent, but are having to claim universal credit because they can't make ends meet. Now, what you've got to do is remove the ridiculous sucker that those who are willfully not working, those getting support from the state, that has to go. And you've got to be quite unsympathetic in the way that you do it. And this doesn't mean that I'm a hard individual or that the government's hard, but there's got to be some tough love because people left to their own devices will not voluntarily work if they can get nearly as much money watching Netflix. And there may be errors made in the government policy, and it's possible that some people who deserve the protective blanket of the state suffer. And it's a tragedy when that happens. But what we've got to make sure is that of the 3 million who aren't even looking for a job, that we weed out every single one of them who should be back in the workplace. And there are a number of things you can do in order at least to get to that first stage. And for example, you can say that that form of welfare only exists for a year. And then after a year, you're required to be on your own. You can institute very high hurdles in terms of medical reports and so on that are required to be submitted in order to justify that you're incapable of working, and so on. And what we've got is a government that isn't prepared to do it because its voter base that include that 7.7 million people, and so they want to feed them, and they want to feed the bad habit. When I say feed them, I mean they want to feed the bad habit, is what I mean. And so the Labour government couldn't even cut 5 billion from the welfare bill. The welfare bill, Andrew, is over 300 billion a year. It couldn't cut 1.6% of that bill. They ended up with a bill, I believe, that's actually bigger as a result of their reforms. So we've got to be absolutely robust on cutting back welfare. The country can't afford it. It's deeply damaging to the employment market, and it is what is encouraging mass immigration. if you cut back welfare dramatically, benefits and so on, you will automatically correct the UK economy and you will automatically address some of the awful consequences, such as mass immigration.
Right. Finally, for today, Ben, and I say lots of people have been sending their comments, and hopefully we'll get you back on a regular basis to deal with those comments. Tommy Robinson, he's a figure that you have said he would be welcome to join your party. He's become a bit of a divisive figure in terms of, well, not become, he's been a long time a divisive figure in terms of political parties and who will support him, who won't support him. Tommy's asked Rupert Lowe to speak at the September the 13th rally that he's going to have. He posted, I'm sure every patriot attending on September the 13th would love to hear from you. Rupert's a bit concerned that it might alienate some of his supporters, so he hasn't confirmed one way or the other. Would you like to speak at that rally? And if so, would you approach Tommy to do so?
So it's not for me to approach Tommy Robinson to speak at his rally. It's for Tommy Robinson to decide what he'd like to do. But as I said, one of the four principles on which we stand is freedom of speech. And I can't make a case for preventing anyone from speaking at a legally convened rally. Um, and I believe I've heard on the grapevine, perhaps it's been confirmed, Jordan Peterson and others are speaking. Um, uh, Rupert, of course, is pulling on a cross-party. His movement is a cross-party movement, and there may be more sensitivity amongst his movement about him speaking at a rally like that, because he's got Tories and so on who are much more prickly about all of this kind of thing. Which is why I say the Tories are really part of the Uniparty, because they don't really stand up vigorously for freedom of speech. But if I'm invited by Tommy Robinson to speak at that event, then I think it would be churlish and wrong to decline. It would just be wrong, because on what basis would I decline? And why should I decline? If I decline having been invited, it's basically because I'm taking the knee to the establishment. That's what it is. It's saying, I know the establishment recognizes Tommy Robinson to be a divisive individual, and therefore I will not speak at a rally at which he is speaking. Um, but that would be wrong, and that would be against freedom of speech.
Okay. Ben, very, very clear. We will have you back on the show. We would encourage anybody that does have questions to send them in to the Andrew Eborn Show, and we'll get Ben back to deal with those. But for now, Ben, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.